Today, we're looking at an indie RPG that likely flew under most of your radars, in spite of its nods back to classics like Legend of Dragoon and Paper Mario, and that is, as the title says, Frameland: A Binary Tale. Now, at first glance, it might look like the other retro-styled RPGs out there, but after reading their email and loading up the game live on stream, I knew this was going to be something worth digging into from a few directions. Now, is it perfect? Obviously not. No game is, but you can tell it was a passion project and the creators actually cared about the world and systems that they were building, which is sadly the exception rather than the rule for a lot of games passing through my inbox these days. And I think the only big thing that I would hold against the title is that, at least in some instances, the writing does feel a bit stilted or lol so random. Though some of this is very obviously intentional, and the reason behind it is revealed as we slowly unravel the origins, history, and personality of the game's two interconnected protagonists. Though, admittedly, some of it is also just there for the humor, since while the game hits on serious topics, it does break it up to keep things from getting too heavy-handed in the other direction, since it is very much intended as a fun weekend RPG, not an RPG to leave you dwelling on existential dreads for a month or two. And really, overall, it does achieve that goal, and it even holds up to a line that I say all too often, which is basically, you don't need a grand 100-hour adventure to make a compelling story and experience. Since sliding in at 10 to 15 hours, this is still a satisfying game to play, with plenty of secrets and lore to mess around with, while it doesn't overstay its welcome because it avoids a lot of the trappings bigger RPGs use to pad out their hour counts. Now, the minimal spoiler version of the story is that the majority of your time will be spent playing as a kid who was whisked away from his home to a seemingly unfamiliar world filled with destructive swarms that have driven humanity to the brink of extinction. In your innocence, you seek information, a way home, and meet your friends along the way. You'll also dive into the perspective of another character in a seemingly different world entirely still, stuck in his mundane job at an unethical company, and the connections between these realities slowly reveal themselves over time through strange encounters and exploration. Now, for me, in spite of finding the story to be decent enough and even liking several of the characters, the main attraction and appeal to me in this game was the mechanics, which will be familiar to anyone who played mid-90s RPGs outside of Final Fantasy. This is because it actually adopts a few of the systems from a handful of cult classics from those eras, with the most prominent being the timed attack system. Now, unlike most timed attack systems, this one actually has multiple impacts on the flow of battle, the most obvious being improved damage dealt on offense and improved damage mitigation on defense. These are pretty bog standard for this type of system, and while Frameland extends it to pretty much every aspect of the battle, even including items, it will feel intuitive for most people who have played these kinds of systems before, especially with the reticle used to indicate the timing. The thing is, the system actually also extends beyond this, since Frameland also uses a universal mana system called AP that is charged through these timed hits, with failed attempts providing no real benefit, mediocre timings providing a little bit of AP, and perfect timings providing a significant boost to the AP generation. This sadly also means that you're not going to be able to start most battles with these stronger special abilities until you get skills boosted to boost your starting AP, at which point you start being able to spiral most easy battles with planning and skill selection, and can get away with some of the more risky plays. Until then, it's a round of normal or low-cost attacks followed by cleanup with your now-readied skills. This shared resource pool also means that you do need to choose which character is going to use their abilities and which ones are just going to support them or focus on charging AP. This choice is helped by the fact that you have a dynamic turn order over on the right-hand side of the screen that adjusts based on your character's speed. The speed of the skills you have selected also impact it, and the speed of the enemies and their chosen skills impact the order as well. This will help you plan the orders of attacks to get the most out of them, or even possibly exploit another mechanic called overheating to deny the opponent their turn entirely by hitting their weaknesses. And interestingly, unlike a lot of games, this one actually gives you the tools to actually consistently exploit these weaknesses, since your skill pools are split into two sources, with character-grown skills that you develop simply by leveling up, as well as an almost simplified materia-style system called remnants. These are basically upgradable skill gems that allow you to either amplify a character's strength, cover their weakness, or even just sometimes give them more options or stats to play with. These also get stronger as you play through the game, since with each battle you'll gain resources that can be fed into them at any save point to push them towards individual level ups that basically unlock more bonuses and skills. Now, to keep your power in check, each character is only allowed to equip up to 3 of these, and even then only after reaching a certain level, but absolutely can help you build up rather fun combos. Now, on top of these combat mechanics, there's solid enough number of things that make their way into the exploration as well. Funny enough, this does also include the timing mechanic in some cases, since your robot dog uses it to blast through walls at certain points, though you will need to upgrade him from time to time to make sure he can get through the tougher walls later in the game. There's also a number of puzzles, though admittedly they are usually a bit more on the simple side compared to proper puzzle-focused RPGs like, say, Lufia. I don't think I ever got stuck on any of them, and for the most part they will just be a matter of finding a key item, hitting a switch, and going further into the dungeon or map. The probably most complex puzzle involves listening and judging the specialties of a small set of NPCs, so you can assign them to roles that make another challenge easier or harder for progression. Though going too far into details on that would definitely spoil a pivotal point in the story. The nice thing is though, this game won't punish you too badly for getting lost, failing these puzzles, or needing to wander through places more than once, since it has fairly consistent save points, and in explorations it uses fixed encounters on the map that you can actually dodge past if you want, or you can beat them and they'll disappear until you leave the area, so you don't have to worry about backtrack pains like in a lot of other somewhat puzzly RPGs. The only really unavoidable fights are the proper bosses, which can range from general slugfest to more puzzle boss designs, where it wants you to trim away problematic entities, or hit the boss with certain types of attacks to take a tough fight down to something a little bit more reasonable. Heck, even the optional dungeon boss has a few tricks you can pull to get him from being a royal nightmare to something a bit more manageable as a mid-boss feat. I personally feel that all of this really helped to make the game a lot more enjoyable to explore, even when I started backtracking to unlock various secrets and bonus endgame items, since while the enemies did respawn when I was several regions away, I never felt punished for getting lost, and I think the only dungeon I really struggled with was sort of my own fault, since I pushed the post-game dungeon before the normal endgame dungeon, which did throw the difficulties of both off quite a bit. Now, it is worth noting, and I'm not going to overtly spoil it, but the endgame dungeon was a bit on the trippy side, and really squared away the concepts the game had been building up to at that point. Needless to say, while it didn't subvert my expectations entirely, it's where the overall vibe of the game really cemented itself in a much more surreal world rather than simply sci-fi fantasy. And overall, if you have $15 to spare and you're craving a pretty fun retro-styled indie RPG, this is a decent enough pickup for a game to play for a weekend or two. Expect some silly writing, RPG references, an engaging combat system, and an editing that plays like a trippy fever dream. And as usual, if you'd like these reviews ad-free, I do release them over on Patreon, and you can check out the full playthroughs behind the reviews over on Let's Play Everything channel, or catch them live over on Twitch.